Hello, and welcome to another installment of these podcasts I've been doing. Today, I'm going to focus on a particular year in music, but not just a particular year, but a particular year for a particular genre. So I'm talking about the year 1973, and I'm talking about the genre known as progressive rock. This, in my opinion, was the height of the scene. This was a moment in time where if you were creative and artistic, these record labels would encourage that, and you might actually have some success. So it was actually cool or hip for a period of time, and I think 1973 epitomizes that moment in time. So I'm going to go through some albums, mostly vinyl. The ones I don't have on vinyl, I'll show you on CD. And then last but not least, I'll give some honorable mentions to some albums that I like, but for whatever reason do not yet have in the catalog. I'm wearing my Yes Songs shirt. This album came out in 1973, that's why I'm wearing it. Also got my Yes Relayer shirt out here. Can't get enough Roger Dean artwork. So Roger Dean did this art, did other bands' artwork, but probably clearly most known for what he did with Yes. Okay, let's see here. Let's just get started, get right into it in no particular order. Great album. This is Brain Salad Surgery by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. ELP, as they were known. The artwork was done by H.R. Geiger. I think it's pronounced Giger, but I'm going to say Geiger. His artwork is what spawned Alien and all the Alien movies. I'm kind of an ELP fan, but this is one of their best works. If it's not their best, it's their second best. But just bombastic. It's got a long track on here called Carn Evil 9. Still You Turn Me On's pretty good. It's very just very experimental, kind of harsh, but it's good. It's good, and it's rocking at times too. So, while they're not my favorite band, I do have a lot of their stuff, and this one's definitely one that you should check out. So ELP. Next up, classic album, King Crimson. Lark's Tongues in Aspic. Love that artwork. If I were to get a tattoo, that might be it. Maybe that's cliche, but this could be the one. The moon face, the sun face. King Crimson. I did not like this album when I first listened to it. It took a while for it to grow on me, because King Crimson is not easy listening. They're very experimental. It's subtle. It's layered. It gets real quiet, then it gets really loud and harsh. The Steven Wilson remixes and remasters that came out are great, because they allow you to hear all those little nuances that I did not hear on some of the original recordings. But either way, Lark's Tongues in Aspic, great album. Nectar, Remember the Future. Awesome artwork, classic album, probably their best. They had A Tab in the Ocean from 72, but this is probably their best or second best. It's just two sidelong tracks. That's how they did it back in the day. 18 and a half, 16 and a half. That's how they did the albums. Great stuff. By the way, all these bands I've mentioned, British. That's a main theme of progressive rock. Seems like 90% of the bands came out of England. Speaking of another British band, Genesis Live. And I love this because there's Peter Gabriel in his bizarre costumes. I don't know if you can see that, but just a classic era of the band. That's Phil Collins, if you can believe that. You've just got Tony Banks, you've got Mike Rutherford. Why can't we find Steve Hackett? There he is in the shadows. Big Steve Hackett fan. Peter Gabriel was great for them. Only 5 songs, 5 big songs. Watcher of the Skies, Get 'Em Out by Friday, Return of the Giant Hogweed, Musical Box, and The Knife. Just great stuff. Genesis in their golden era. This was off the Foxtrot album. So they're playing Foxtrot, Nursery Crime, and one epic track from Trespass. It's great. You might ask, why is Black Sabbath's Sabbath Bloody Sabbath in the discussion of progressive rock? Well, to me, Black Sabbath is progressive rock. They were doing things that no one was doing. And on this particular album from '73, Rick Wakeman was brought into the studio to do synthesizer and keyboard and piano overdubs. But this is their most progressive album. They were really ambitious on this. So even though the cover looks like it could be all satanic, it's actually their most progressive album. You could say that about Sabotage too, but Spiral Architect is a great progressive song. It's just got all kinds of cool things. It's got clapping in the beginning. It's got just that whole proggy vibe. Who Are You is experimental. Even Killing Yourself to Live, which is a kind of a dark, heavy one, but Tony Iommi has a guitar effect during the verses, and I didn't hear any guitar players using any sort of strange tremolo or any of those effects back in '73, but he was doing them. So I love this album. Let's see. Jethro Tull, A Passion Play. It's good. It's not my favorite. I hate to sound like everybody else, but I think my favorites are, Thick as a Brick, most of Aqualung. I think Benefit was good. I think, from what I've heard, Minstrel in the Gallery is really good. But this is another solid album from Jethro Tull in their heyday. This is like their 5th album, so they were already off and running at this point. Mahavishnu Orchestra, Birds of Fire. I consider this progressive rock. This is what they call jazz fusion. This is John McLaughlin and everyone. Just super advanced, technical, if that was your thing at the time. They spawned a bunch of jazz fusion bands like Return to Forever and so on and so forth. So if you like your music really, advanced, the masters, this is a good album. It doesn't have a lot of soul, but if you just like to listen to musicians just flaunt their skills, good album. One of the first to do something like that. Is there any album bigger from that era than Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd? I mean, I don't know what else to say about this album. It flows from beginning to end. It's great. I don't think you need me to tell you anything more about the album. It is what it is. Dark Side of the Moon, one of the all-time great albums. This one looks a lot like my shirt. This is Yes Songs by Yes. Triple vinyl. This is sort of Roger Dean's coming out party for his artwork. Not only is the cover great, then you got, what is this landscape? What's going on over here? I don't even know if this all fits in the screen. If it does, that would be great. You've got this image on the back. Look at that, outer space. That's one of my favorite images. Just again, triple vinyl. Awesome. And they played the heck out of the Yes album, Fragile and Close to the Edge on this. It's just great. My dad had it when I was a little kid. My dad had this album, and I was fascinated by the artwork, and he would play the one side that has Mood for a Day, excerpts from the Six Wives of Henry VIII, and into a heavier version of Roundabout. Blew me away. Later in that same year, Tales from Topographic Oceans, a double album. Again, speaking of 1973, gatefold. Oh, album's coming out there. Just absolutely stunning. 4 sidelong tracks. So this is my favorite, what I call my favorite flawed masterpiece. They had about 60 minutes of good material, but the vinyl format basically said you need 20 minutes per side. So if you're going to do a double album, it needs to be closer to 80 minutes than 60. So they had to pad it with a bunch of just filler. But if this had been trimmed down to about 60 minutes, this would be a masterpiece. Revealing Science of God is. The other tracks, specifically The Ancient, but a few of the other tracks have what I would call filler. There's some downtime. But otherwise, great album, great artwork, just a great charm. The vibe of this time, I love it. My last vinyl that I have here, I guess you could call this progressive rock, but it's Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield. Again, sidelong tracks. You probably recognize this music if you ever watched The Exorcist. And again, I think every band that I just showed you, British. Mike Oldfield is British. Everything is British. Um, and then here are some CDs I have. So I need to get this on vinyl, but Genesis, Selling England by the Pound. So I showed you the live one. This was the studio one from that year. And just with that classic lineup of Peter Gabriel, you've got Dancing with the Moonlit Night, Firth of Fifth, Battle of Epping Forest, The Cinema Show. Arguably their best album. I consider Led Zeppelin, early Led Zeppelin, to be kind of progressive. They were certainly doing things before anyone else was. Houses of the Holy. The song remains the same, and the Rain song, Over the Hills and Far Away, all those songs are good and just original, and they just far more advanced than all of their other contemporaries, at least in the rock and roll field. No Quarter. That song is a one-off from that. It's very experimental. You should hear the Tool cover of New Quarter. But anyway, I'm including Led Zeppelin in this. Here you go. Here's an artist that is actually American and not British. Frank Zappa, Overnight Sensation. There's Frank. Dirty Love, catchy song. Zombie Wolf, Dynamo Hum, Montana, all good stuff on here. Hilarious, but so advanced, like an orchestra, a little jazzy, just very complex. He's awesome. And last but not least, I thought I'd throw this in here, mainly just to represent an entire scene that I think a lot of Americans for sure just weren't really aware of. Museo Rosenbach, Zarathustra. I actually got into this from Michael Ockerfeld of Opeth. He was talking about him and wearing this t-shirt. So I checked it out. And it led me to this whole scene out of Italy. Rock Progressivo Italiano. There are tons of good bands out of Italy that were never known because they would just sing in their native language. PFM comes to mind. There are a few others. But, Rock Progressivo Italiano. This is the only one I have from 73 that I can show you for this. But several good bands out of that scene that just weren't known because, again, they didn't sing in English, but you could still find them. So Museo Rosenbach. So that pretty much covers it. I do want to give a few honorable mentions here. Why I don't have this is beyond me. Gentle Giant, In a Glass House. Could be their best album. Great album. The title track and I think the first track, Runaway. Magma. Mechanic Destructu Commando. Magma is their own thing. You want to talk about being original. Nobody sounds like Magma. Band out of... and Magma, Gentle Giant being out of England. Magma is actually out of France. Can, Future Days, strange band. Very rhythmic. They had an album called Future Days. Can is out of Germany. Steely Dan, Countdown to Ecstasy. That's an American band. Listen to the song Boston Rag, classic song. Eloy, their first album, Inside. Eloy is German. Love those guys, totally underrated. Another German band, Tangerine Dream, who I'm a huge fan of early Tangerine Dream. They had an album out called Aten. And then last but not least, the band Camel out of England with their self-titled debut. So I think I counted this up beforehand. There were 11 vinyl, 4 CDs, and then 7 honorable mentions. So that was just 22 of the top progressive rock albums of 1973. But, other than this podcast, anybody that knows me fairly well has heard me go on a diatribe about how 1973 was the greatest year in music history. There's one other year that might rival it, which I may do a podcast on shortly. But so there you have it, 1973, the height of progressive rock. So thanks for watching. See you next time.